Hello and welcome to the Eventual Knits podcast. I'm excited to be doing my first actual podcast after recording my intro podcast about 2 weeks ago. Today is January 13th. It is a balmy 32 degrees Fahrenheit, 0 degrees Celsius here in Minnesota. It's actually pretty warm for January, and I am not complaining. I have my tea in my Iro mug, delectable tea or deadly poison. It's tea today. It's a white peach. I encourage you to also bring something to drink while you watch or listen. I am excited to be getting back into the swing of things. We started school again on the 4th or 3rd or 2nd. It feels like so long ago already that we came back from winter break, and it's actually been pretty good but busy getting back into, I'm a special ed teacher, so kids are needing a lot of assessments and IEPs are due, and it's been pretty busy, but I am super happy and excited to get back to the knitting. So let's start with, what am I wearing? Right now I am wearing the Local Yarn Shawl by Casapinka, and it is knit in hedgehog fibers, sock yarn in colorways Fly and Goblin. I knitted on size 4 3.5 mil needles, and the yarn is 90% wool, 10% nylon, and I love it. It's the first big shawl that I made, not big, but full-size shawl that I have made, and I like to typically wear it in a loose knot. I also have worn it more across my chest and pinned in the back with those little jute clips, but I prefer it this way. I'm pretty low maintenance. Would rather just be able to have something covering my shoulders and not fiddling with falling off. My shoulders are pretty sloped and small, and so everything falls off of them. I am also wearing my neighbor Totoro socks. I'm not going to show you my feet, but I will show you pictures. This is Satsuki and May colorway by Cannon Hand Dyes in Charles Merino sock yarn. It's 80% merino, 20% nylon. I am part of Cannon Hand Dyes Miyazaki self-striping yarn club, and so I decided I wanted to do her polar opposites, and so that means that each sock that I knit, the colorways are opposites. So if you look closely at these, you can see that it's 5 or 6 rows of pink, and then a couple rows of orange, and then it's vice versa. And they always send a contrasting color that if you wanted to do for the toes and heel, which I like to do. These particular socks did end up in the wash. I try to hand wash my socks as much as possible because of bleeding, not because of felting or anything like that, but these socks did get some gray bleeding, and that's too bad, but since I have small feet, I have definitely enough yarn to knit another pair if it really bothers me. I generally, as you can see in the picture, like my socks to be ankle socks because I have really small feet, really small ankles, and then my calves get really big really fast, and so ankle socks work better because they don't fall down, and I just haven't found the best way to get socks that are a little bit longer with a little bit more design to not just fall down and pool around my ankles. I'm also wearing a Sow's Ear t-shirt. Sow's Ear is, as you can see, in Verona, Wisconsin. It's just outside of Madison. I go to Madison all the time, and Sow's Ear is like the best knitting shop. It's a combined knitting shop and cafe, and the food is delicious, the coffee amazing, and they also have classes for knitting, crocheting, weaving, anything fiber related, and it has such a good vibe. It's like a converted house that they turned into the coffee shop, knitting shop. If I'm being honest, like my dream would be to maybe open a coffee shop with someone else who is doing a knitting shop, and that's like my dream. It'd be amazing. Until then, I just like to visit Madison as much as possible. It's about a 4-hour drive from where I live, but I have friends who live out there, and I try really hard to make it out there often, and Sow's Ear is always a stop for me during the weekend. In the world, what am I wearing? I, every day, wear my slip stitch hat. The pattern is super easy. I knit it in just a couple hours. Pom-pom, super easy. It's the pattern is a Mrs. Moon and the yarn is a Mrs. Moon plump. 80% wool, 20% alpaca, so it's super warm and cozy and very squishy. The colors are Bonbon and Raspberry Ripple. I knit them on size 13 9mm needles and size 15 10mm needles, 15, 13, and I wear it every day. I also am wearing a scarf that I wove. I can't remember what the Noro ball was that I used for my warp, but I used a Noro rainbow roll for my weft, and it turned out so beautiful. I wear it all the time. People always think that I bought it, and I'm super happy with it. It was my very first project I ever wove, and if you don't know what a roll is, this is what a Noro roll looks like. It's super pretty. Very fun to work with. Gotta be careful, of course, it falls apart really easily if you pull too hard, but yeah, it was a lot of fun. It was really cool. I would definitely do something like that again. And finally, especially on cold mornings and cold days, I wear my Till Death mitts. These are mittens with a Latvian braid cuff. That was super easy, super fun. Cannot wait to do something like that again. The Till Death mitts is a mystery knit along, or was a mystery knit along, by Stephanie Lotvin, Telly Bean Knits, and the yarn came in a kit to go along with the mystery knit along by Sun Valley Fibers. They're so soft, so warm, they are so gorgeous. It was super fun to knit, much easier than it looks. There was an option where you could put beads on it, but I was not interested in that. I want my gloves to be for function. It gets very cold here, so I did not want to add beads and complicate matters, but wear these all the time, so comfy. Now I'm going to talk about what I am knitting. Prepare yourselves, I am knitting a lot of things. So first off is the High Hampton Cowl by Claudia Miller McLean on US 3.25 needles. Hayahayas and Chagus are pretty much my needles of choice. I really like how sharp and smooth, and I don't know, the feel of those needles are amazing, so both of those are like my top faves for all knitting. The yarn that I'm using for the Hampton Cowl came in a mini kit, basically, with Claudia Hand Paints 100% Silk Serenity. The two colors that I have they came together are Bayou and Jungle. I would guess that this one is Jungle, and this one is Bayou. So rich and beautiful. 100% silk is insanely soft, and you knit with both strands together. This is how far I am. It's basically just stuck in it in the round, but the colors are super rich and super soft and super amazing. I have a little needle saver. I usually don't put my needles on anything, but because silk is so slippery, I felt like I really should, otherwise it just falls apart. Next, I am knitting the Vanilla Latte socks by A Free Spirit on Ravelry. I am knitting them on size 00s 1.75mm Chagus in Canon Hand Dyes Friday I'm in Love. This colorway is so gorgeous, and most socks I knit toe up, but I am mixing it up and doing top down. I did do a twisted rib. It's mildly noticeable, not super noticeable. Maybe when I put it on it'll be more noticeable, but the pattern is simple, but it breaks up all of the stockinette socks that I have been knitting. And Friday, Charles Merino self-striping is what this is. It's 80% merino, 20% nylon, and I am keeping it in a bag by Cherry Plum Tree. Love it, has socks on it. This is green, and I think it's a small or medium size bag, and I love these bags. I would highly recommend buying from Cherry Plum Tree on Etsy. Next, I am working on some plain socks for Steve. You'll notice his feet are much bigger than my feet. I started this sock at least a year ago, maybe more. It was after I'd knit my first pair of socks and realized that socks weren't really that scary, I like to knit with afterthought heel, so I knit the whole thing up to the top and then I added on afterthought heel. And the yarn starts out in the middle, more yellow with less speckles, and it just keeps getting increasingly speckles till you get to the end where it is mostly black. And I thought, well, why don't I knit both socks and then add in a darker heel? If I was a little smarter, I would have remembered to just do that on the toe as well. But I started the second sock. I did a more rounded toe this time. Again, I said I tried following a pattern for big feet, and I don't know why. And I think it actually is a little too big for him. And so what I'm probably going to end up doing is undoing this and redoing it once I finish this one, because I don't like the idea of two different toes and kind of an odd sock. As you can see, my decreases, or my increases went really weirdly. Like, I don't know, there's more on this side. Super unlike me. So it was just me getting to know how to do socks, and I would like to fix that in the future. I'm keeping that in a bag by Becca Ron, and I love these bags. They were selling these bags at Yarn Over, which is our Minnesota knitting event, and I had only given myself $200 to spend, and it was not within my budget to buy all of the bags, so I just settled with one, which is amazing, and I want to put all of my projects in here all the time. It's such a good bag. Oh, the yarn too, don't want to forget. The yarn for Steve's socks is Ogle Design Fiber Arts 100% wool in the coloration fingering. Next, I am knitting the Constellate hat by Hunter Hammerson. I found this pattern in their book Firmament, and if you look at Hunter's designs, they are super, super creative, innovative. I love, just beautiful, different ways of, just amazing, amazing ways of making hats, making gloves. Right now they have been posting a lot on their blog about big cables and doing them in a more ingenious kind of way, and I'm super excited about everything that they come up with, and I would highly recommend following their Instagram or their blog, Hunter Hammerson. Super, super excited about everything they make and want to make everything they make. So, I'm working on the Constellate hat. I finished the brim of the hat, which is meant to be flipped up or kept down, up to you. I think I'm going to flip it up, and if you can see the beautiful, super easy design. The yarn that I'm knitting it in is Onslow Fingering Nebula in the colorway Sexy. It's kind of like a mocha brown with sparkles, as you can see. And it's 86% superwash merino, 14% stellina. And I'm knitting these on size 3 Hayas. I'm a pretty loose knitter, so I generally tend to knit on smaller needles, and I like the tight way that the stitches knit up. I'm keeping that in a free bag, well, free, that I got from Simply Socks yarn for purchasing yarn at some point in time. Again, would really, really encourage you to go find Hunter Hammerson, look at their designs. Oh my gosh, buy everything, amazing. Lastly, I am knitting the Peep shawl. Peep stands for Progressive East End Project. This pattern is by Laura Rasmussen, and the Progressive East End Project is something that I initially thought the entire knitting community took a part of, but it's actually something that is local to where I am. So I live on the east side of the Twin Cities, and there are a bunch of local yarn shops that band together. I believe it's 6 of them, and they come up with a pattern every year and yarn that you can go around and pick up yarn for. So if you look at my shawl that I'm working on, you pick a base colorway. So each store has a base colorway that represents their store. Whatever sample they decided to knit, you can choose that base. And of course, my local yarn store, Knitting from the Heart, that's in Woodbury, Minnesota, they knit in, I can't even remember what color, and the woman was like, after I finished it, I was really excited. I wanted to try this other color that's not officially a part of it, but I really liked it. And of course, that's the one I really liked. And so it's in this, I honestly don't remember what colorway or what yarn it is, and it's so beautiful. But the contrasting colors here, which I kind of did randomly, I think you're supposed to be a fade, but because the next chunk of this shawl will be fading the colors, but with it being blue and shades of gray, I at the time just didn't care, and black, like, they don't really fade as easily, I feel like, and so I just kind of did them in random order. I believe I'm going to end the shawl with doing as much of a fade as possible, but if you look and see how ingenious these little sections are, I love them, and it's mostly just stockinette in between, and it's an asymmetrical shawl, and I'm super excited about it. And so yeah, you'd go to each store. It's supporting, you know, local yarn shops in Minnesota, and it's been a lot of fun to knit. I'm very excited to finish that. The bag that I have this one in is Simply Socks from the Spooky Kitty kit. It came with a bunch of like spooky wooden stitch markers, and I really bought it for this yarn. This is the Overlook Hotel yarn. It is the most Halloween of Halloween yarn. I'm so excited about it. I like cannot wait to knit with it. That's, I mean, I think the kit was like $70, and I did not care buying it, using the yarn. Amazing. Another part of the Peep Shawl project, now that I'm going back, is so at each store, so this is one of the sample knits here, at each store you pick up one piece of the pattern, and it does at the end all combine into a digital code if you want to get it into Ravelry. I don't mind knitting off of the paper pieces, and it helps me keep track and break up the pattern anyway. Super fun. I just first discovered it last year, but I did not like the shawl that they came up with so much. I think it was a smaller shawl. I like shawls that sit more on me, and so I didn't partake, but I thought it was super cool. There's at least one woman who I met who bikes the entire thing, and it's a pretty big hike. I mean, it hits 6 different cities, and it's crazy. So I really like how much people get into these kinds of things, and I love that like my local yarn stores get into that. So I think that's actually it for everything that I'm knitting, mostly working on socks, a shawl. I had just finished all of my winter knitting. My mom would like me to knit her an elf hat for her birthday, which is coming up in a week, and one of my friends' moms has asked me to knit, I think, a hat for her. I haven't gotten all of the materials yet, for her soon also. So a few things here and there, but mostly working on my own knitting. I'm a pretty selfish knitter, or I like knitting things for myself. I also like knitting things for people who I know will appreciate my knits, and yeah, it's pretty cool. I am also listening to some podcasts this week. So far, it's funny because with my podcasts, I feel like they go through periods of not updating, and then they all update at the same time. Even some of the podcasts who knit who record once a week and versus like every other week. And it's so funny how after the holidays and after, I don't know, big events like maybe people who teach when school starts, that kind of thing, that they all suddenly come up at once after like a brief hiatus, but not actually hiatus, just like you get busy with life. And so the podcast that I've started listening to right now, I'm currently listening to the Curious Handmade podcast by Helen Stewart. I really like her beginning of the year podcast because she talks about New Year's resolutions and getting more organized and what she's planning for the year design-wise. And in this particular one, she talks about how she tried to do the Make 9 last year and got barely any done. So she thought maybe she would do a Make 4, and even that sounded like too much for her. And it kind of made me feel bad that, like, I know that she does do a lot of knitting, but as a designer, and it sounds like she gets a lot of joy from seeing her designs knit by people and seeing what they come up with and that sort of thing, but it's so interesting to me that she doesn't get to come up with her own knits or like knit for pleasure as much, and that would kind of make me sad. But anyway, I really do like listening to her beginning of the year podcasts and what her plans are for the year, and it's just really inspiring and a lot of fun. I also have been listening to the Traveling Stitches podcast with Noelle. I'm very happy for her that she is deciding that she's going to settle down in Florida for the time being, and she mentioned that she was worried that people would not want to listen as much if she's not traveling with her Renaissance fair, but I really don't think that that's an issue. I feel like her podcast is super well organized, and I think that people are interested in just what she's doing and what she's knitting, whether or not she's traveling. And of course, she can talk about Universal, which is amazing. I went to Universal for the first time with Steve and my friends this year in August, and it was so much fun, way better than I expected. I had kind of a bitter experience when I was a teenager going with my family to Disney World, which is, I know, different from Universal, but still, I kind of had a bad attitude about it, and it ended up being so much fun. I can't wait to go back. I am also working through the most recent Geeky Girls Knit podcast. Dammy is back at college after having winter break, and it's interesting to watch the two of them figure out how to navigate doing a podcast when they are not in the same place. And so that's been interesting. And also, going to college is a big deal, especially your first year there. And finally, the first podcast I listened to this year in its entirety was the 2U's, and it was interesting to listen to them talk about looking through the old podcasts that they did for the year and like what kind of podcasts people listen to the most. And they said that they appear to be podcasts where one of them was traveling or otherwise not like connected to knitting. And I feel like that's more of a correlation than like speaking to the fact that no one wants to hear about their knitting, because obviously people go to their podcast to listen to knitting discussions. And generally, I really enjoy listening to them. I like everything that they talk about. They just seem super fun, and I always look forward to their episodes. I am also reading All Wound Up by Yarn Harlot, Stephanie Pearl McPhee. I've read most of her books. I have also listened to several of her books on audiobook, because the ones that she narrates, and it's been a lot of fun. I really, really like Stephanie Pearl McPhee. I love the way that she talks, and I love the way that she writes, and so anything that I can read, I don't even mind like rereading the things that she writes, because it's just so apt and relevant and just fun. Otherwise, I think that's about it. This ended up being shorter than I had anticipated. I feel like I'm forgetting something, or maybe I talk too fast. We'll see. Feel free to leave me constructive criticism in the comments below. Let me know what you think, anything you want me to talk about on my podcast. If you want me to talk about things more in depth than I have. This is my first time at this, so I am just feeling out the way things go. So thank you for joining me, and I look forward to seeing you again soon. Bye.